What's up? I'm May. Welcome back to Mindful May. Today is part 2 of my series, I Could Make That, in which I find inspiration online and then try to DIY it. The dress that I chose for my inspiration is made out of more of a stiff cotton, but as you know, I really love to thrift everything that I sew with, so all I had on hand was a cream sort of knit stretch jersey material, so I decided to use that. Keep watching if you want to see how it turned out. But you can also sew along with me. I leave all my measurements in there, and the sizing is pretty generous. I wanted it to have kind of a loose fit, so anywhere between a medium and large could probably fit in this dress. So let's get this project started. Gathering all my materials, here is that really cozy cream fabric that I got from the thrift store. Got some semi-matching thread, scissors, tape, pins. And step 1 is to cut out the skirt. The measurements here are 21 inches high and 63 inches long. I am cutting this on the fold. As I start to cut it, I just wanted to get through that 63 inches a little faster, so I folded it in half. So this is just going to be one long rectangle. We will sew right sides together to attach this skirt. I'm grabbing my pins. I really like to start at the beginning and then pin at the end first, and then make my way to the center. After we sew that straight stitch, we will create a rolled hem for the bottom of the dress. And this is just a 1/4 inch double roll. What I ended up doing was, because I have a serger, I serged the ends and just did a single roll. I didn't want a ton of bulk for this fabric, so one roll worked a lot better for me. Here it is all sewn around. And then we're going to sew a loose stitch at the top. And this is what will gather it all in to create that ruching or ruffled effect. I have adjusted my stitch length to something wider and my tension to something looser. And I'm just going to sew fairly close to the edge with that loose stitch all the way around. And then I'm going to put the skirt to the side and start working on the top. It's kind of a kimono style. It kind of looks like 3 rectangles sewn together with a neck hole, but we are going to cut it out in one big piece. Again, to save some time, I'm doing this on the fold, so I just folded it in half. And just for ease here, I did map out all the measurements because my camera wasn't wide enough to really catch everything. So you can screenshot this and use this as a base to make your own top. So from here, I'm taking my waist measurement, cutting it in half, so we're at 10.5 inches. And then my height up to the armpit is 3 inches. And then from the shoulder all the way down to the waist is 14 inches. And then I'm making a little bit of a neckline. It's about 6 inches. And then I'm just creating a line and getting my head perfectly in the shot. I'm just creating that curved neckline. Next, I am going from the point of the shoulder, or where the neckline ends, out to the wrist, and that is 20 inches. And then again from the shoulder, all the way down is 14. Since the sleeve is just an extension of the shoulder, it's going to be 14 inches all the way across. So I'm just marking the top of the shoulder line. And then getting that 20 inches, which is where my wrist will be. And then I'm taking the 14 minus the 3 for the armpit, and kind of making a right angle here, and just marking this little rectangle that I will be cutting out to create our sleeve. So this part's really simple. It really just is a rectangle that you're cutting out, going up 3 inches, all the way down to the wrist. I'm gonna start with that neckline. I chose 12 inches all around because that is what fit over my head. And I've had too many failed projects where something just doesn't squeeze over my head by the time I'm done. Here it is all laid out. And I'm going to fold it back in half again to create the back panel, which is just a mirror of the same thing. So I will fold it, place it on another folded piece of fabric, and cut it out again. Step 3 is to create the neck binding. We are just cutting this 1 inch by 12.5 inches. If you've seen my other video, I teach you how to make bias binding by cutting it on a 45-degree angle. I'm not going to show you that today. And now I am placing right sides together, and we are just going to attach it at both ends. Here's how it looks all put together. Now let's put the top together so we have a place to put the bias binding. I've got my front and my back, and I'm going to place them right sides together. And just as the illustration showed, we are going to connect it at the shoulder going down the top of the sleeve. I did use my serger again because this is kind of a stretchy fabric, but you can do a zigzag or just a straight stitch would be perfect. Next step is the bottom of the sleeve and moving into the waist. Matching up all those perfect angles, we will start at the wrist, sew down. You will pivot your machine and then continue a straight line down the waist. Here is mine all serged together. Again, straight line will be just fine. We will be creating a rolled hem at the wrist. If we were to try to do this after we created that elastic gathering, then it would be really tricky. So let's clean up the edge first. And just as we did with the bottom of the skirt, we will be doing a 1/4 inch double roll. Again, you could also overlock or zigzag and just do a single fold over. I'm going with a double roll. We will sew this all the way around. Next step is to attach that binding. Now that our shoulder seams are together, we've got a place to put it. So taking right sides together, so our top bodice is right side out, and we're going to match these side seams together and pin all the way around. This is a bit of a different bias binding than I normally do. This one is hidden inside of the dress. So here's how it looks. We're going to sew it on. Sewing really close to the neckline, all the way around. And turning it inside out for our next step. One roll tucks it in, and the second roll covers the hem and pulls the binding to the inside of the dress. This looks really clean and nice. I'll show you what it looks like after this roll. So we double roll, it covers what we just sewed, all nice and tucked in there. And then all you see is the top edge. We'll continue to pin around. And here it is at the end. I flipped it right side out to see what it looks like. Again, super clean. Everything is tucked to the inside, so you wouldn't even know there's bias binding. Let's sew this on. I'm sewing as close to that left edge as I can, just to get everything tucked in there. And I'll show you how that looks later. Next, let's sew the elastic onto the sleeve. I'm using something that I was able to thrift, which is lingerie elastic. Who knew that existed? It's not super different than anything else you would find. It's just a little softer on the skin, and it's what I had on hand. I'm measuring the largest part of my forearm and adding an inch just for some extra stretch and room there. And then cutting one for the other arm. And then to find the placement, I'm measuring from the bottom of my wrist, and I think 4 inches looks nice. So I'm going to mark 4 inches all the way around the wrist. And you'll see why later. This is really helpful. It kind of serves as a guide when we attach that elastic. So we are sewing the elastic directly onto the fabric. I've placed my needle down to hold the elastic in. I stretch the elastic, sew a little bit, stretch it, sew, and I'm making sure to match up my elastic with those little chalk marks that I made, just so I know that I'm sewing straight. So you stretch, sew, continue that pattern until you meet the other end of your elastic. You will sew backwards and forwards over that section. And then the elastic wrist is done. Do that same thing on the other wrist, and our top is finished. Now it's time to create the gather in the skirt. So from that loose stitch that we made earlier, we're going to be creating kind of a ruching or a gather by pulling on the thread and moving the fabric along the thread, gathering it together. So your thread will get longer and your skirt will become gathered. That's a bit of a long process. All we're looking for is it to match the same width as our top piece. Once I've got it the same width, I am going to flip it right sides together. And if you have a side seam, I only have one, you will match it up with the waist and the skirt. Again, right sides together, pop a pin in there, and make your way pinning all the way around, making adjustments as needed with that ruching. And then we'll sew all the way around. Here is this beauty in my disco ball light, all finished. Thank you as always for joining me. If you learned something new or you like this video, give it a thumbs up and then subscribe to my channel for some more sewing videos. We'll see you next time. Cheers!